from the 13th century to 1857. Now, you will hear and see how Tallinn's town wall was completed and defensive towers were erected in the Middle Ages, and how earthen fortifications, or the Bastionveld, came to be in the modern era, the Age of Cannons. Tallinn's famous fortifications can still be seen today. Even before the first stone castle was built by the Danes on Tombea Hill, it was home to Lindanisa, a stronghold built by Estonians in the 11th century. Arriving with a large fleet, the King of Denmark, Valdemar II the Victorious, and his large force of crusaders made a landing and occupied the old stronghold. The crusaders fought and defeated the Estonian pagans in the Battle of Lindanise. It was then that the construction of medieval stone fortifications began on Tombea, which laid the foundation for the formation of the city of Tallinn. The ruler's residence, called the Small Castle, the first building made with lime mortar, was erected in the southwestern corner of Tombea. Today, this is the location of Tombea Castle. From this seat of power, the land has been ruled from the time of the first viceroys of the Kingdom of Denmark to today's parliament, the Riigikogu. Danish rule, 1219 to 1346. Reval, a city of merchants and artisans, was established in the area between Tombea Hill and the sea. By order of Margaret I, the widowed Queen of Denmark, the construction of defensive structures began around the city. Originally, it was an earthwork rampart, or a palisade. However, at the end of the Danish rule, the city was already surrounded by a stone wall. The first historical document with a description of the defensive wall was a letter written by Knight Jens Gunne, Viceroy of the King of Denmark. In addition, the letter contained instructions for strengthening the city's defenses. Square-shaped gate towers rose over gateways, and wall towers were added to the corners of the lower sections of the curtain wall, with arched recesses and the longer sections in between them. The big castle on Tombea was enclosed by a wall, crowned with numerous towers. Rule of the Livonian Order, 1346 to 1561. In the early days of the Livonian Order, the small castle was transformed into a conventional castle with 4 wings and a courtyard. Towers were placed at the 4 corners of the castle. Stood and Kur, which had a square base and turned into an octagon higher up. Tall Herman and Landskrona, both high and round towers, and Bilstinger, a small turret. After the Danish conquest of Visby, an important merchant city in the middle of the Baltic Sea, Tallinn, fearing a similar fate, began to reinforce its defensive structures. The walls were strengthened with supports or buttresses. Barbicans were added to the gates. Note: the horseshoe-shaped ground plan of the wall towers and the structural elements made of local limestone are unique to the towers of Tallinn. The town wall was built higher once again. Due to the greater range and destructive power of the cannons, the brunt of the fortification works now shifted beyond the line of the town hall. Separate massive artillery towers were erected. The city's first real and exceptionally high artillery tower, called Kiek, was built on the most vulnerable part of the city, facing the Thirteenth hill. A low and sturdy artillery tower nicknamed Fat Margaret was built in front of the Great Coastal Gate. In the age of artillery, earthen fortifications turned out to be a better defensive solution than stone walls. Earthen fortifications were more resistant to enemy artillery fire and could also be used by the defenders as firing platforms for their own artillery. In the decades leading up to the Livonian War, the first massive earthen fortifications were built outside of the town wall. Work began on a high rondo in front of the Kiek Tower. After the war, Tallinn's first bastion-type fortifications were built to protect the southern side of Tombea. The first bastions in the city were built on the low seaside area in the eastern part of the city. The construction was led by Gebhard Hiemsel, professor of mathematics and city engineer. Hiemsel planned to build a half bastion in front of the Kiek Tower. The most grandiose works were carried out during the few decades preceding the Great Northern War under the supervision of Erik Dahlberg, the leading engineer for the Kingdom of Sweden. The landscape surrounding the town wall changed beyond recognition. The townspeople were forced to give up their vegetable patches, flower beds, orchards, and meadows located adjacent to the wall to make room for earthen fortifications. The fortifications on the south side of Tallinn were fully completed. They consisted of two bastions, the Swedish bastion in front of Tallinn Castle and the Ingrian bastion in front of the Kiek Tower. An upper floor was added to the Kiek Tower for artillery, and its two lower floors remained below ground level. Tallinn's most powerful fortification built during Swedish rule was Skåne Bastion, built on the northern side of the city by the sea. Defensive fortifications during rule of the Russian Empire, 1710 to 1857. Paralyzed by the plague epidemic, Tallinn was forced to surrender to an enemy for the first time in its history. The city surrendered without a battle to the Russian troops besieging the city. By order of Peter I, the construction of military port and coastal fortifications began. Over the next half a century or so, the earthen fortifications that had been slightly further developed under Russian rule lost their importance. The first public green area of the city, the Children's Garden, was built on the ramparts located on the site of the present-day Freedom Square. Medieval towers were converted into homes. The town wall became increasingly hidden from view as rows of wooden buildings were springing up next to it. According to a new fortification plan of the Russian Empire, fortifications, or forts, extended far beyond the borders of the city. Of these, only one fort was built. The collar on the fort, completed in 1840 and used as defense barracks. Today, the complex is known as Battery. During the Crimean War, the fortifications continued to serve military purposes, but after the war, they were permanently transferred to the city. The majority of the earthen fortifications were leveled. Three large bastions, including the Ingrian bastion, located in front of the Kiek, survived and became green spaces and recreational venues much loved by the residents of the city. In 1966, the Old Town Conservation Area was created, and the decision to restore the medieval defensive buildings and structures was taken. An effort was made to restore the defensive towers and the town wall back to their medieval appearance. Much of the town wall was cleared of buildings which had been added at a later time, and apartments were removed from many of the defensive towers. The towers were put into public use. The Maiden's Tower, for example, became a popular cafe. Tallinn's characteristic towers and city wall, which still frame the old town to the delight of all, are among the most unique preserved defensive structures in the world. The Bastion Belt, which has largely survived to this day, has been transformed into green spaces and parks, excellent places to spend time outdoors.